Okay, Alexander, we have to talk about the narrative that Russia is running out of weapons. We also have to talk about the narrative is Ukraine. I don't even want to say Ukraine. Well, okay, is Ukraine running out of weapons? But also, are EU member states and the United States running out of weapons? That's why I was a little hesitant saying, is the Ukraine running out of weapons? Because really, the Ukraine running out of weapons is an effect of the collective West digging into their stockpiles and depleting their own weapon systems. And then those weapons go to Russia. They get destroyed or taken by the Russians. And it's like this whole chain reaction. Who's running out of weapons?
Well, straightforwardly, Ukraine is. I don't think there's any dispute about this. It's the Ukrainians who are coming round, demanding all the time that they run out of more and more weapons. And we now have articles appearing in the US media which confirm this. There was an article in Bloomberg on the 14th of April. There was another article in CNN of all places on the 16th of April, saying that Ukraine is now perilously short of ammunition. It's running out of ammunition. Obviously, when we're talking about ammunition, we mean shells and that kind of thing, and not just, of course, ammunition, but every kind of other weapon system. I mean, we hear that they're running out of aircraft, usable aircraft, that they're running out of armored vehicles, that they're running out of all of these things, and clearly they are running out. And that's why they're coming to the West and they're asking the West to replace all of these things. And the West, as we're going to discuss in a moment, is running into all kinds of problems. As for the Russians, of course, we don't know the size of their weapon stocks, but we can only see what is actually happening, which is that the Russian military operations in Ukraine are intensifying. There's more and more missile strikes every day now. I mean, the tempo is steadily rising. There's now more and more airstrikes. The Russian Air Force is now joining in the fighting in eastern Ukraine and Donbass to an increasing extent. And there don't seem to be any equipment shortages. And of course, Russian artillery is just putting down volumes of sharp fire on a scale that seems enormous. So either they have enormous stocks, or, and this is what I personally think, though of course I can't confirm it, I think that since February there's been steps done to crank out an awful lot more weapon systems out of Russian armaments factories. So I suspect that Russian armaments factories are now working round the clock, churning out guns and shells and missiles, and that's why we're starting to see more and more of them appearing. I think that's probably the major story, one of the major stories that we one day find out about when we get a sense of what's really going on in this war.
Yeah, I've seen videos on Telegram where they've shown the actual factories, or I don't have a way to confirm it 100%. But supposedly these are the factories in Russia that are just churning out all of these weapons, everything from tanks to like you said, small ammunitions, artillery, and it's just all over the Runet, the Russian internet and Telegram. And I guess the narrative is we are cranking these weapons out. I mean, they want to kind of show that we're on it. The Russian propaganda side of things wants to
Absolutely.
say we're busy, we're working around the clock, and we're going to continue to crank out all of these weapons and continue doing what we're doing. On the flip side, Bloomberg ran an article about 4 or 5 days ago where they actually warned that the U.S. is digging too deep into their stockpiles, and the U.S. is going to have a problem. I've heard they already have problems with Javelin missiles, for example. The country that has the most Javelin missiles right now is Russia. I mean, I'm embellishing it a little bit, but yeah, that's kind of the joke that's going around.
You're not far off. You're not far off. Yeah, mm-hmm. And stingers, and all kinds of other things. I mean, again, I mean, I've seen these videos, and I want to stress these are propaganda videos that are being churned out by the Russians and on the Runet and things. But you see all kinds of Russian soldiers and Donbass militia soldiers waving their Panzerfausts and their javelins and things like this. So they're obviously capturing large quantities of these things. So obviously, I mean, I'm not saying that they got the most of anybody, but I mean, they do now have clearly, even if all, you added up all the ones you see on these pictures, they now clearly have quite a lot. But the fundamental point, and what you're now getting to read, and it's not just on that Bloomberg article, is that the rate of depletion that Ukraine is experiencing in terms of the arms it's receiving from the West, and of course its own arms production, has been massively disrupted by Russian missile strikes. But the rate of depletion Ukraine is experiencing is much faster than the rate of replacement that the West can make. So I read, I think it was on CNN actually, that Ukraine is using up more, using up in a day the number of Javelin missiles that the US supplies in a week. I mean, it's that kind of speed. And with artillery shells, and remember, the Russians are targeting all the Ukrainian factories that are building artillery shells. With artillery shells, it's even more critical because, again, artillery is used on an enormous scale in this war. The West doesn't make artillery in the kind of calibers that the Ukrainian artillery historically uses, because Ukraine is still based on Soviet calibers, 152 millimeter. NATO uses 155 millimeter. You can't adapt 155 millimeter shells to be launched from 152 millimeter guns. So the West is now finding that it's running out of old Soviet era guns that were, lying around Eastern Europe. They've all been sent to Ukraine. Many of them have already been destroyed. They're now having to think about sending guns that they make themselves, 155 millimeter guns. The US is sending 18 howitzers, which is, I think it's an almost tiny percentage point of what Ukraine uses in terms of artillery. And it's sending 40,000 rounds of ammunition. That sounds like a lot, but somebody made a calculation that a battery of, well, not a battery, but 200 guns would use all that ammunition up in about an hour.
So I was on Zero Hedge, and they were running an article from Common Dreams, the Common Dreams blog, and the title, this is a recent article, the title says, Pentagon contractors seizing new gold rush to cash in on the Ukraine crisis. Even before hostilities broke out, the CEOs of major weapons firms were talking about how tensions in Europe could pad their profits. And the whole article, I'll put a link for the article down below. It's quite a lengthy article, but it just makes the point that the MIC, the military-industrial complex, is just laughing all the way to the bank with everything that's happening with regards not only the conflict. It's not so much the conflict in Ukraine, while that's good for their business. It's the fact that for some unknown reason, and I'll leave it like that, for some unknown reason, all of Europe and the United States and the Biden White House has decided to deplete all their inventory of everything they have, dump it in Ukraine and get rid of it, and start anew. And the CEOs of all these MIC companies are just saying, this is great. We're going to have to refill stockpiles of all of these countries. We're going to ink all kinds of R&D contracts. We're going to ink all kinds of defense and budget contracts with all of these countries. And it's just going to be a boom for the next 10 to 20 years for these companies.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to be, they're looking forward to a golden age. The parallels with the 60s grow for me all the time, because this is exactly what was happening in the 60s. I mean, one of the reasons for the great inflation of the 70s, again, was uncontrolled arms spending in the West on the arms race with the Soviet Union, and also on, the massive spend on conventional weapons to fight the Vietnam War. By the way, the volumes of weapons the US was cranking up in those days was far greater than today, but today weapon systems cost exponentially more than they did in the 60s. So we're going to find ourselves in exactly the same situation as we did in the 60s, only much worse, because the inflation fires have already taken off. But as you rightly say, some people will do very well. The MIC, not just, of course, in the US, but overwhelmingly in the US, but in other places, will do very well too. I can just give a little example. I mean, today I heard that Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, said that Britain is going to provide Stormer vehicles with Starstreak anti-aircraft missiles to Ukraine. Of course, we've already provided a very large proportion of our Starstreak missiles, the ones that you're supposed to carry around and launch, and they're very expensive. I've heard, actually, I can't confirm this, that in the handheld form, they haven't really worked very well, because if they're very fast and they're very advanced and they're very expensive, but they're big and heavy and difficult to carry around. And so you have to, it's not easy to use them in the actual field of battle. So now we're going to provide them, with Stormer vehicles, which are these armoured vehicles which carry them on top, because, that's the only way you can really get them to work. Britain only has 150 of these. 150 of these is not going to make a big difference in the fight in Ukraine. I mean, it really isn't. And in fact, the likelihood is many of them will be destroyed because, vehicles like this can be seen, tracked, attacked, all that kind of thing. But they have to be replaced. And replacing them is going to cost an awful lot more than it was initially producing them. So, whoever it is in Britain who makes these things, both the armoured vehicle that goes with it and the missiles themselves, is going to be making an awful lot of money. They will be ordering a lot of champagne over the next few days, and they'll be toasting each other extremely well. And of course, some of that money, let's be straightforward about it, gets recycled into the political system. We get all kinds of people in Congress, in the British Parliament. I'm sure that same happens in various European countries too. They'll find all kinds of nice ways to find their way to benefit from this sort of thing. A lot of people are going to become very, very rich on the back of all of this. All the rest of us, as happened in the 70s, in the 60s and 70s, will become poorer.
Yeah, well, let's not forget a lot of the weapons that are being sent to Ukraine are going to hit the black market, so you're going to have a lot of other people making all kinds of money from the black market. Another point that's really interesting, which was made in this article, was the big money is made in R&D. So like stuff like hypersonic weapons, you'll do an R&D for 5-10 years. But the money they're going to make from the research and development without even coming up with a functioning hypersonic missile, I'm simplifying it, without having to deliver the goods, just the R&D portion of it and the budget windfall is going to be tremendous. And you have entirely new markets like Germany, all of a sudden having a budget of 100 billion overnight to spend on weapons, which is it's like opening up a whole new market for the MIC out of nothing, out of thin air. All of a sudden, you have 100 billion right there in Germany.
Absolutely, it's exactly what's going to happen. But can I just say something about this? I mean, a particular sort of bugbear in mind. People always go on about, what a failure the F-35 aircraft program supposedly was, that it came over so massively overpriced and all that. Well, it took so long, and apparently there's still problems with the aircraft, and they haven't really been sorted out. It's not been a failure at all. The MIC has done incredibly well out of the F-35. It suits them to keep it in development for, decades, to, prolong its production, to get more and more money spent to repair its various problems. Obviously, if you want a workable system, fast, that you can use in battle, well, that's a different story. I mean, once upon a time, what they used to say about the United States during the Second World War, that it could churn out tanks like it churned out refrigerators. I mean, that's what they used to say then. But that's not the situation we have today. We're not looking at producing cheap, reliable, simple weapons you can use in quickly and in big numbers. What you're looking at are very big numbers, but those big numbers come in dollar signs.
Yeah. War is a racket, that's for
Absolutely.
sure.
Absolutely.
Oh boy. All right. If you're watching this video from Rumble, you will see a maroon red button that will take you to our locals community page, the duran.locals.com. That is where you will find our great locals community, and go to the Duran shop, use the code GOODDAY, and you will get 10% off all our merchandise. There is the mug, and that is the code GOODDAY. Take care.